Hello, beautiful souls. Thank you so much for joining me. This video is a continuation from my previous video on guilt, and I think the topic was replacing guilt with compassion. And I just want to elaborate more on the topic of guilt because it's been coming up a lot in my conversations, in my interactions, and in my work with clients. And it's a big topic that the Course in Miracles actually dissects and makes it very clear that guilt is wholly insane. And I want to get more into that. So I want to talk about the insanity of guilt and how that plays out in relationships. So I guess I want to start off when we're born. When we're born into this experience, we're babies. We're not even aware that we're separated from our environment. We're not even seeing ourselves as an ego, as an identity, as a separate self. So we come to this world perceiving we're one with everything. And as we start to get older, we start to get conditioned and we start to build this ego. And the minute we recognize we are this individual self, guilt comes into play right away because we're all of a sudden out of sync with who we really are. So as children, as we develop this ego, guilt comes into play, and then that's when this personality starts to develop, and we start listening to what the world is telling us of who we really are versus already coming into this world knowing that we are one and all with everything. So the world starts to tell us who we really are, and this world is a product of guilt because we have these ideas of what is right or wrong, good or bad, ugly, beautiful, all this stuff that we've made up to experience duality. And so guilt comes into play because we already, as human beings coming into this world and experiencing separation, automatically have that innate part of us that feels guilty. We already feel like we're either wrong as human beings, or something wrong with us, or we're just wrong. We're just bad. We're just bad for whatever reason. There's no logical explanation. We just somehow feel this on a deeper level. But we don't understand where it's coming from. We just think it has to do with us. But a lot of us, we don't even recognize this guilt is there. So we start to project it onto the world and making the things around us and our relationships and circumstances, everything outside of us as guilty. Because this world is a representation of guilt when we look at it from the human eyes, when we look at it from ego. We just see, the stuff that's happening that just seems unfair and just wrong, evil, whatever it is. But what we come to understand as we go deeper, we come into this world, thinking we are this victim of not choosing to come into this experience and having these things happen to us, or things that we witness happening in our lives. We just think that we just kind of came in here unwillingly to experience this life in all its facets. So again, this guilt that we already have within us, we feel like we're wrong or we're bad or there's something wrong with us, and we project that. And that comes from that innate disconnect from God, disconnect from our source when we develop this ego, this identity. So then we start to feel guilty, we start to project that onto the world, and this becomes our reality. Now in special relationships, it's interesting. Now it all starts with, again, that separation from God and thinking we're this ego and this identity and this small self, right? And there's a feeling of something missing. So we want to let go of this feeling of something missing, but we don't recognize that it's an illusion, that we're actually not separate from God, that we are vessels of the divine expressing ourselves in human form. We have forgotten this. So what we do is we try to seek that void, that emptiness. We try to complete ourselves through the outer world, and especially I want to talk about relationships. A lot of us seek outside ourselves through relationships to fill the void within us, to try to complete us, and to try to feel whole and, again, complete and one and content and happy and at peace. But what happens is we go looking for certain people, or we're attracted to certain people, and they come into our lives, and we already have this image, this projection of what we think they are, or who we think they are, and who we want them to be. So there's already these expectations that we are projecting. So, so for example, two people come together, they fall in love. They may not know each other very well, or maybe they do, who knows, but they get together and it seems like a unity. Because for a little while, it seems like there's no separation, there's no two egos. It's like these two people meet and they merge. But what they don't realize is that merging is an illusion. That merging is what their expectations are of one another, and they feel they're seeing it, they feel it's so real, and they come together, and then that's that. They're in love, they're happy. And they feel complete, they feel whole, they feel like they found their salvation. And then over time, they start to witness the ego self coming back, old patterns, old belief systems, old baggage come up, and they all of a sudden start splitting off, and then they become two people again. And then all of a sudden the guilt happens. So all these expectations we had of this person that they're not meeting, we start to make them feel guilty or project this guilt onto them. So we're making them wrong, we're making them bad, we're making them not good enough, all this stuff. And what we don't recognize is that it's not really about them, it's about us. So we project this guilt because we wanted that person to be God. We wanted that love of God. We wanted that fullness, that connection, that oneness, that unity that can't come from an ego relationship. It can't come from two egos coming together. But we think we've already told ourselves on a deeper subconscious level that this is the case because we've denied. We've been conditioned to deny our connection with God, connection to Source, connection to unity. And because we've been conditioned to deny this, now we're conditioned to seek it through the illusion of other people, other egos, other, people. And so this is what happens. We don't understand that person is really reflecting our own guilt. And so it's hard to swallow when you're in it, but the more we can recognize it, the more we're able to forgive the other person, because what we've come to see is that we didn't even see them for who they were. We saw them for what we wanted to see. And then because over time we realized that wasn't really the case, we start projecting this guilt and this anger and this resentment. But really it comes back to us because we put the love of God in that ego, in that sense of false identity when it wasn't really there. And this is why seeking salvation, seeking peace, seeking these means through these relationships. And the Course in Miracles talks about the special relationships. The special relationships are the special relationships we connect with ego, right? So it's like the special relationship we have with our mom and with our dad and with our brother, all these labels that we put on these relationships, and they all have all these labels have expectations of what we want from these people. So the fact that we have this expectation already isn't true love, isn't unconditional love, isn't the reality of love. It's the illusion of what we perceive, what we've made up to believe as love. And when it doesn't match that expectation, it turns into hate, it turns into war, it turns into, enemies and this is stuff. This is when we start projecting enemies outside of ourselves. But really it's not reality, it really isn't. And this is what we start to witness. So I posted here on my wall a couple weeks ago about how we try to hold these special relationships together out of guilt. So sometimes we don't want to forgive, or we don't want to let it go of the story or of whatever happened, because we are afraid that if we forgive and we truly see things for as they are, we actually lose that story, we actually lose that person, because we've already made up a story of what this person represents, of who they are and all this stuff. So to forgive and to really see things as they are it's that felt sense of losing that person. And that's the another illusion that comes with guilt, is that we feel like if we do forgive, we lose that person. And that guilt actually holds the relationships together. So say I'm with someone and, and I'm feeling guilty, and so I know I have to do certain things in order to hold the relationship. So whether maybe I don't feel like I'm good enough or I'm strong enough or whatever, so I start to sacrifice, start doing things that are not part of my authentic self, not part of my true essence. I start doing things out of sacrifice to hold that relationship together. So I give up my passions, I give up whatever to be with this person, to pleasure them and to make them happy. But at the end of the day, I started becoming resentful and hateful and not happy because they're getting in the way of what I really want to do. But I know if I let go of that and start and I don't get involved in that, and I don't have these expectations or this sense of having to do, I can let go of that. But then I think if I don't do these things, I'll lose that person. So that I'm stuck in this pattern of sacrifice and resentment, and vice versa, the other person too. And the whole thing of guilt is, okay, so say I fell in love with this person and this is what I expect from them. And if they don't hold to that, then the relationship's over. Like if you don't, I don't know, buy me flowers once a week, then it's done. So that's part of that guilt relationship that's there. But if we say, hey, no, you know what? I'm going to let this go and not let it be this way. We have to be open to that relationship changing in form. But the ego trips up because the ego wants these things and has these certain expectations of what it wants to get. It's all about getting in the relationship, getting. That's how the ego works. And so, yes, and this is what happens. And yes, we're human. Yes, we go through these motions of what a relationship is and having these expectations and these roles and whatever. And everyone is on their own individual path. And I'm not here to tell you how to live your life or how to view your relationships. But for me, this has been a huge awakening, because those of you who know my personal story, I've been searching for the love of my life, all my life for like 30 years. And then I found the man who I'm with today, and I put him on a pedestal, and he was my salvation. He was perfect. He was everything. And you better believe over time that changed. And all of a sudden I started projecting all this guilt and this resentment. I wasn't even seeing him. It was all an obstruction of my own mind, that I was seeing something that wasn't really there, and it wasn't matching what I wanted. And then I started becoming resentful and hateful. But really all it was me remembering or recognizing that that person isn't what I was not seeing the truth in that person. I was giving my power away to that person. I wanted that person to save me. I wanted that person to love me. I wanted this person to do these things for me, to fill the void, to do all these things that I wanted that relationship to do. And then the Course in Miracles helped me really snap out of that illusion of that's not where you're going to seek salvation. The only relationship you truly have is with the divine, with God. And then when you can use that relationship and let that channel through all your other relationships, that's when your special relationships transfer to holy relationships. We're here to transcend these special relationships into holy relationships. And I'm not saying that through human experiences we're not going to fall in these traps of ego and expectation, of guilt and all that. It's the human experience, but it's constant practice and awareness and mindfulness of when we're getting into this trip up of ego and of guilt, we can recognize it for what it is, forgive it, and let it go. And this is a lifetime practice. Why? Because we've chosen to come into this world and be human beings and have an ego and go through these roles and these special relationships. So it's not that we need to, deny all this stuff and just say, okay, none of this matters. But it's just about being mindful of where your guilt is and what your relationship truly represents, and what is it here to do for you. And so I wrote down that the ego really believes that it can get and keep by making guilty. So if I make you feel guilty, you will stay, you won't leave me, and I will get what I want. And that's the insane thought system of the ego and guilt. And this is why guilt is totally insane. And it was interesting because I just had an experience this past weekend where my mother, she is taking care of my grandparents. She's sacrificed a lot for them and is still doing a lot. They're getting older, their health is declining. And my grandfather recently went to the hospital back in December, and he was diagnosed with cancer. And he's 92 now, 93 or something. He's lived a long life, still alive. But at that time, they're living in their own apartment, and my mom was saying that when that happened, when he was in the hospital, she wanted to start looking for a home, like a senior home for them to live in, because she realized, wow, they're getting ill, and I can't be around all the time because my mom, she works, and so she wanted to put them in a home. And my grandmother was totally not okay with that decision, or that she was saying, no, I don't want to be in a home. So my mom, out of guilt, said okay. She let it go, and they're not in a home. My grandfather eventually returned home, but since then it's now 6 months later, and his health is declining even more so, and it's getting worse. And now my mom's like, okay, you know what? We can't do this anymore. He can't live at home alone without any 24-hour care. So my mom is now starting to look for a home. And I don't know, here in Ontario, it takes time to find a place, and she's now feeling resentful because she could have had this done. She could have already found a place for them, say 6 months ago, but because my grandmother said no, my mom felt guilty. So then she's like, okay, no. But so out of guilt, she did what my grandma wanted. But now that it's kind of backfired, and my grandfather's getting more and more ill, she's now making my grandmother guilty, and she's saying to my grandmother, her mother, that it's your fault and that I should have never listened to you, and I should have just gone ahead and looked for a home. So my mom's telling me over the weekend that it's all my grandma's fault. So this is another example of the insane guilty relationship. No matter what you do out of guilt and obligation, if it comes from a place of guilt and not love, you will resent that person in some shape or form, and it's not right. My mom, instead of having guilt, just seeing the situation for what it is, sending love and doing the right thing based on what you're feeling. Many people think that guilt is healthy, that guilt is a good human trait. But when they can actually recognize what guilt actually does, it backfires and it makes you feel like crap. And it's this one cycle of projection and then coming back. You feel guilty, you project it, and then you make that person feel guilty, and it comes back at you all the time. When you hold guilt, you project it. Because like I mentioned in the last video, what you give, what you have, you give. What you have, you project. And that's why for guilt, it's about giving it away. It's not about keeping it. It's not about feeling guilty and humbling. It's about saying, okay, I'm feeling guilty, but I don't want to project this. I want to give it away to the Holy Spirit. I want to give it away to God. I want to give it away to the divine, because I don't want this in myself, and I don't want to project this. And again, we're human. We'll fall into these traps every once in a while of guilt in special relationships, but then it's coming back to our own and owning our power and saying, you know what, I am an innocent child of God. And in my innocence, I know I'm already forgiven. And with that forgiveness, I can extend that to all my brothers and sisters. And that's my whole thing with relationships, and my whole views and values of relationships changing since the course, and especially more so this year, I'm really witnessing these special relationships and how they've played out in my life, and how they've caused a lot of pleasure, but they've also caused a lot of pain. And pain and pleasure, according to ego, they're kind of both sides of the same coin. So what I'm doing is going beyond that and saying what true pleasure is, and which is peace and acceptance and tranquility and inner knowing of who I am. And these experiences are just there to experience. And I don't want either. I don't want the illusion of love, which comes with expectations and labeling and roles. And I don't want the other side of the coin, which is hate and resentment and guilt. I want to go beyond that to the love of God, and that is my salvation. That is the love that I've been seeking ever since I was a kid, and I was conditioned to feel like I was not a part of that divine. When we all forgot, when we all became toddlers and we learned our name, we learned that we were actually separate from our environment, and that we started to forget this oneness with everything. So it's going back to that, remembering that I am connected with everything and everyone. And if I'm guilty, everything else around me is going to be guilty. And in order to save the world from guilt, I need to save myself from guilt. And that's the path of forgiveness. That's where the miracles occur, when you can witness that and hold that space. And in that moment with my mom, I wasn't judging her. I just saw it for what it was, which was complete insanity. And I said, it's not Grandma's fault. It's not your fault. It's no one's fault. It is what it is. Mistakes happen. Misperceptions happen. And that's the thing. Instead of guilt, instead of making people wrong and bad, it's all about making mistakes and learning. We're all here to learn. We're continuing learning what we've forgotten. It's like a re-remembering. And the Course says, we're not really here to figure out love or seek love, because love is it. Love is the reality. Love is who we are. It says your task is not to seek for love, but merely to seek and find all the barriers within yourself which you have built against it. It's not necessary to seek for what is true, but it is necessary to seek for what is false. So again, we must be vigilant in how we're projecting and how we're witnessing this guilt within us, the guilt of separation, the guilt that we feel of being separate from God, and being in this human form, and thinking we're this ego, and we're these insane thoughts, and we're identifying with all this stuff that's not true. So again, it's about mindfulness. I believe in mindfulness practice and just observing and witnessing those insane thoughts or feelings coming through that don't make sense, that are just totally irrational and that are totally unjustified, but just being with it and just accepting myself and meeting myself where I am. And that's what I say for all of you, meeting ourselves where we are in any given moment, and allowing that space for whatever to come up and to surface and to dissolve. And these things will come up because these are layers of the onion of old conditioning, old patterns, and we're here to strip away these layers until we get deeper and deeper into truth of things, and we start to less react, and we start to respond, and we start to connect to our true essence, our true inner power, our true oneness with God and our magnificence, our being, and then exuding that to the world, and remembering that this is all just an experience, but that we are all innocent and we are all one. So God bless, take care. I hope you all enjoyed this. If you like my videos, please like them and share them with your friends and family. And I am taking donations for videos as well, so feel free to donate. And if you're interested in holistic psychotherapy sessions, I am offering holistic psychotherapy sessions in my home in Hamilton. So if you're in the Halton region or Hamilton area, I'm offering sessions at $25 an hour for session while I'm completing the duration of my studies as a psychotherapist. And for those of you who love my intuitive, astrological, holistic counseling and coaching through modalities like, astrology and numerology and all that good stuff, I offer those services on my regular rates. So I'm available in person, on the phone, or on Skype. So let me know and contact me if you want some services. So God bless, take care, I love you all. Let go of guilt and surrender it and connect to your innocence, and you are the love of God, and the love that you're looking for is already within you. There's no seeking elsewhere, only extending. And to extend is to receive back. God bless. Take care. Bye.